Namaskar, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Astrobytes. I use these editions to bring out some of the concepts of Vedic astrology, which is Jyotisha. And today, I'm going to talk specifically on the principles of Sampoorna, which means the complete Annadanam. Annadanam means donation of rice and feeding people is the process of Annadanam. It is also considered that Annadanam is a Sarva Shreshta Danam, which means it is of the highest order. Feeding people is considered to be one of the most highest and the most favorable parts of donations. Now, in today's times, in the modern times, Annadanam has restricted itself only to the checkbook culture, which means you go somewhere and you write a check or you give them cash and you say, this is my contribution towards Annadanam. But we need to understand the real process of Annadanam to get the maximum benefits of this kind of donations, which is called as a Daan. Now, let's look at what was the original form of Annadanam and how it was conducted. In those times, it was the kings or those people who could afford to feed everybody in their kingdom or within their community. That was considered to be somebody who was called as a Yajamana. Yajamana means somebody who takes up the mantle of doing this Annadanam. And usually this Annadanam was done during important festivals or in celebratory rituals that were happening, like the coronation of the king. So that was the entire kingdom was fed generously by the king. So the first principle of Annadanam in today's times for us, even though in those times the kings used to have access to many cooks who would prepare the food for them, but in today's times, when we have to feed somebody, the ritual is you should have a bath in the morning, freshen up, do your prayers, and then you should start cooking and you should prepare your own, you should prepare the food yourself. That was the process. And after that, there was this process of how elaborate the food can be displayed and how that can be served. It is always that the Yajamana and his spouse would always participate in the process of doing the donations and serving the food which was cooked. And usually it is the Yajamana's wife who will be also involved in cooking the main recipe with the help of assistants and cooks or domestic assistants would always be there. Now, the Yajamana, the king or whoever is doing this ritual, has to serve everybody. And usually it was like a plantain leaf was placed. And the first item which was served was salt. Now, in today's times also, if you are unable to cook the entire meal, also make a point to just add a little bit of salt to every food before it is being served, because salt makes the food tasty, and salt is connected to the moon because it comes from the ocean and the salt is prepared from the ocean. And that means also there is a saying, I have eaten your salt, so I will never be able to be disloyal to you. Maine aapka namak khaya hai, so I will never be able to cheat on you. So salt was the first item which was served, and then typically you would be serving the pickles, and then the rest of the dishes would be served, and the final thing that would be served is the rice. You also have to know that whenever you go to an important event, it's always the most important persons arrive the last. So rice, anna, is always served at the end after all the other dishes are served. And then, of course, after the rice is served, you will either get the dal, which is the lentils, or you will get a lentil soup, or you will also get rasam or sambar or anything that can go with the rice. Now, before you start with your food and your meals, generally all the people who are served would keep a few grains of rice, especially the Brahmins and the Vedic priest, and they will also sprinkle waters and say the mantras so that they don't allow any ants and other things to come towards that. So they leave it outside the trail of water that they put around. A small few drops of water are put around the plantain leaf, and a few grains of rice are also kept for those ants and other insects which might probably come and interfere with your food. So that's why it has to be protected. So with mantras, they used to also put this. And then there is an order in which the serving of the people used to happen, and this is based on the astrological principles of Rashi Digbali. Digbali means which gets directional strength. So Mercury and Jupiter gets directional strength in the first bhava, in the first house. So they are usually to be served the first. So whenever we start with a prayer, we start with a prayer. Om Shri Matru Devatabhyo Namaha. Om Shri Pitru Devatabhyo Namaha. Om Shri Achara Devatabhyo Namaha. Om Shri Atiti Devatabhyo Namaha. Om Shri Shri Raghuveer Samartah Hari Om. So whenever we start serving, we always start serving with giving the food to the acharyas. Acharyas, the learned people, and the young children who are also students, and the younger children have to be fed first in this ritual. So the priests, the brahmanas, the educated class, and the children were the first to be served. And this process is to be followed because Jupiter and Mercury, Mercury represents the younger population, Jupiter represents the young children, and also it represents the acharyas. So whether it is upadhyaya, adhyapaka, these are all different names of teachers. So we start with adhyapaka, upadhyaya, acharya, pandit, drishtas, and then we have guru. And so you can also serve the guru, and all the saintly people, ascetics, have to be served the first. The next is always to be served to the seventh from the first house. The seventh house is where you see that Saturn gets Digbali, or it gets directional strength when it goes to the seventh house. So seventh house, Saturn represents everybody who is lesser fortunate. It also represents the servants in the house. It also represents the physically challenged people. Okay, so these are the people you should obviously serve the next. After the acharyas and the children and the students are served the food first, it is the next order is to serve, because Saturn gets exalted, Saturn gets exalted, as well as Saturn gets exalted in Libra, and it also gets directional strength when it goes to the seventh bhava, or the seventh house of any chart. The third is always women have to be served the next, and also the Vaishyas, which you said the merchants, they are the next ones. The traders, the merchants, and the women have to be served. Moon and Venus gets directional strength when they go into the fourth bhava. And finally, it is the army, the military, the police, enforcement officers of the king, and the other dignitaries who have come, they would be fed the next. That's the last process that you would always feed, because Sun and Mars, it's directional strength in the 10th bhava, which is the 7th to the 4th bhava. So these are the order in which the Annadanam used to be conducted. Now there is a process also. The king has to be fed the last, because he's called as a Pradhana Sevaka, which means he's a servant of all the people there. So it's his ritual to be fed the last. After he has served everybody, he has to, also the process was to pick up the leftover the plantain leaves of after the food has been eaten. That has to be put in a basket. It has to be carried on his head, and he has to dispose of. Now, this might not be for everybody who is being fed, but a sample of people, he has to do this. So that means he is a sevaka, he is a servant. So he first takes the plantain leaf or the leftover food or whatever from after people have eaten. The first is the brahmanas, then it is the shudras, or the people who are lesser fortunate, and people who are disabled. And then the next would be the women, and the Vaishyas, the traders. And finally, it would be the Kshatriyas, which is the fighters, the protectors, the people who guard the fortresses of the kingdom, and people who also enforce the laws. So these are the people he should always pick up the thing and put it in a basket, carry it on his head, and dispose it off. This is the entire process of Annadanam. And that is very important to know, that rice is always served the last, because rice doesn't fall in the cardinal moon, doesn't get exalted in the cardinal signs, which we call as Chara Rashis. In the Chara Rashis, you see it is the sun gets exalted in Aries, Jupiter gets exalted in Cancer, Saturn gets exalted in Libra, and we have Mars, which gets exalted in the 10th bhava, or the 10th Rashi, which is Capricorn. So if you look at this, moon gets always exalted in Taurus, and that's also his Mool Trikona, the head office. So rice has been given a lot of importance because it is all about bringing stability into our life. So if you need to bring stability and there is no groundedness, then Annadanam is a very good thing that everybody should practice. And this is the ritual that I have told you. This was practiced in the past. Probably it's difficult to have all of this practice now, but there is a lesson that we can learn from our understanding of the Digbali aspects of the planet. So the first bhava, Jupiter and Mercury, they get Digbali, the directional strength. So the first bhava is representing the acharyas, the upadhyayas, adhyapakas, and guru, and rishis, and ascetic sadhus and sons. And then the younger children, the younger population should also be fed first, because they are hungry and they need to be nourished. So nourishment of the younger population and children have to be done first. Next is always the people who are lesser fortunate. And then you also look at those people who are physically challenged. Those also get the priority to be sitting and be fed. Then it is the women of the nation. They also help in cooking the food and everything. So they have to also be honored. So in that order, they have been given the preference. And then finally, it is the army, the police, and the other people have to be fed, because Mars and Sun get exalted in the 10th bhava, and Sun, being the king, has to be always served at the end, because he is the one. But today what happens? They are being served the first. That is not the order in which we should do the Annadanam, or any kind of such rituals have to always be practiced as per the Shastras. And finally, it is also a custom after Annadanam to donate Vastradhanam and give some marginal cash to all of them who have participated. So this was the process. So Vastras is usually uncut dhoti, which is was given to them, or some women were given saris to wear. So some kind of dress was to be given, vastra, and also some kind of marginal cash, and a small box of sweets was also given. Now, in all of this, you remember, after the rice was served, it's always the place for the sweet dish to come in the end, which is called as the kheer or the payasam. That's always served at the end, and it has to be that everybody should be satisfied with the food that is offered. There should be no shortage of food when you are serving this Annadanam concept. Okay, so I hope you have enjoyed this short video on understanding the process of Annadanam. And today, as I speak, we are also in Pitru Paksha. So in Pitru Paksha, it is always important to do these kind of charitable donations and feeding people is said to be very auspicious. Till the 14th of October 2023, we know that we are in the fortnight of our ancestors. So feeding people is one of the most auspicious things that you can do during this time. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Namaskar. Bye bye now.